like to call the work session to order for January 26th, 2024. City Clerk, please read the roll.
Let the record reflect that all members are present.
Thank you. We have 2 items on the work session agenda. I would like to remind council staff will be pausing intermediately to answer any questions. First item is to hear an update on the Goodyear Arizona Hotel and Conference Center market and finance feasibility study, business development manager. But first we're going to start, I'm going to throw it over to the city manager to kick it off. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I thought it was important to kind of give some background as to why we're here tonight, because it's been a while. After doing some research, this goes back to June 7th of 21 at a work session when we did the, we updated council on the Estrella Falls market study. And we remember it was high density, medium density, low density, and there was a lot of conversation about that. Well, included in that work session, there was also comments by then Mayor Georgia Lord and council members about hotel, conference center. And that would be, you know, great. And it was an idea thrown out. So we believe at that time, that's where the direction, Julie took that. It was a supplemental, and we didn't get on it right away, but now here are the results from that long time conversation. So tonight, this is just to present to you. It's not to ask you for funding. It's just, is this something that you would like staff to take away and have additional conversations with the landowners, because they own the land? And is this even something we want to continue to talk about or not at this point in time? So I am now going to turn it over to our Economic Development Director, Wendy Bridges, and she will kick it off from here.
Thank you, Winnette. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. As Winnette said, I'm Wendy Bridges, Director of Economic Development for the City of Goodyear. We are here tonight to present the findings of the Goodyear Hotel Conference Center and Market and Financial Feasibility Study. This item relates to the economic vitality section of the newly adopted strategic plan, where the city seeks diverse and high-quality development that supports the community's economic sustainability and fosters economic development strategies that invest in public amenities and infrastructure to enhance our community. To that end, this presentation explores a potential strategy for the Council's consideration. We are joined by our consultants from Hunden Strategic Partners, Rob Hunden and Lucas Nudeful, who will present the findings and recommendations. And we'd also like to thank our partners, Globe Corporation and Red Development, who are here with us tonight for their support throughout the entire study. Now I'm going to turn it over to Joe Stewart, Business Development Manager, who's been the city staff lead on this project.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As part of the city's strategic goals in partnership with Globe Corporation and Red Development to make GSQ a West Valley regional destination, the Goodyear Economic Development Team released an RFP for services to provide an analysis and recommendations on the feasibility of a hotel and conference center development at GSQ. As part of the selection process, city staff and Red Development interviewed 3 qualified firms. The contract was awarded to Hunden Strategic Partners, which has extensive experience and expertise in this field. Their experience conducting studies of this nature was demonstrated throughout the project and culminated in a comprehensive report which has been provided to you in advance of this work session. The research included a full-day site visit, stakeholder interviews, and market and financial analyses. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Rob and Lucas to begin the presentation.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Good afternoon. My name is Rob Hunden, CEO of Hunden Partners. Lucas Nudeful was really the project lead on this, and so if I get into trouble, he's going to save me. So really appreciate the opportunity to be here and bring a little gloomy weather from Chicago your way. So in any event, I'll get right to it. We tried to keep this relatively high level compared to the full study, which is pretty detailed. Then happy to take questions at the end. So just a little bit about our background, just to give a sense of it. I like to tell people that Hunden Partners does nerdy work for cool places. And what that means is that we're at the intersection, our projects are at the intersection of economic development, real estate development, and tourism development. So there's something transformative, iconic, sort of uplifting about all of these things. If you want to hire someone to figure out if you can, host a Hampton Inn or a Comfort Suites by the side of the highway, that's a whole different deal. That's not who we are. So I think we're, when we kicked off this project with you, what we heard from leadership is that you wanted to uplift who you are. You wanted to have a center of town that was a level higher than where you've been, and because these are generational investments and developments that will speak to who you are and sort of create who you want to be when you grow up a little bit as a community, right? And you're fast growing, so you have a chance to sort of manage that. So this is where we live in terms of convention and conference centers, hotels, boutique and meeting hotels, and mixed-use districts, youth sports, professional sports, the whole 9 yards. And then in terms of the different buckets of our services, what we have done for you is really the core of this page, which is the core of our practice, which is market analyses, market feasibility, financial feasibility, and economic and fiscal impact analysis. The economic and fiscal impact analysis is really the public sector's rationale for investing in a project. If something isn't feasible for the private sector to do only on its own, the public sector often gets involved. So a lot of our projects are what we call public-private partnerships, or sometimes they're public-public investments in many ways. We also conduct full sort of what we call placemaking action plans, which looks at your entire community to see what you have. We have 8 pillars of place that we look at to see where your gaps and opportunities are. So it's something that we could certainly talk about another time. And then after today, if this is something that's still of interest to you, then we can certainly talk about the next steps in business planning and scenarios and all of that to go through the process of seeking or searching for a competitive developer process to find out who might want to develop on the land out here. And so that's really who we are and what we do. In terms of the methodology, well, first off, city manager, gave you the backstory on why now for this study, or why a year ago. We were in rainy weather last March when we were here for the kickoff, believe it or not. It was a lovely event, and we had a great time. But obviously, when we met last year, the whole notion was, again, we want to elevate who we are. We want to create a sense of place. Right now, we're just this booming place, but there's really no heartbeat to it. We want to create this heartbeat. And so this is one component that can anchor the heartbeat that Globe Corp and Red and GSQ, like all of that coming together as part of that creation of that heartbeat of the center place of your community. So we were really looking at a conference center / hotel, a conference center and hotel. They can be one and the same or separated physically. In terms of our approach, as Joe mentioned, we were here and did our kickoff and orientation. We interviewed a lot of stakeholders here, and then of course we did a lot of research and interviews back in Chicago. So we called and talked to a number of hotel owners and operators, developers, some of whom we've worked with before in other projects around the country that are developing out here, but others as well. In addition, we talked to comparable and competitive properties. So all of that went into it. Of course, then we dig into the detailed statistics of the marketplace, both on the conference center side and the hotel side. We look at case studies. Where has this been done elsewhere, and how has it panned out for them, and what does that sort of look like and mean? And then all of that sort of gets you to the recommendations. Sort of looking at these best practices, supply and demand, and all of that. What does that mean for you? So we had scenarios. We ended up with the current recommendation. That certainly could change as market conditions change too. But then we ran the market and financial projections, which we won't glaze your eyes over with all those details today, but we'll show you the summary. And then, of course, the impact analysis, which is the community's return on investment if, what's net new to Goodyear from this. So in terms of the headlines, so SWOT analysis, if you will. First off, you're growing considerably. You're growing very quickly, leading growth in the West Valley. It's very exciting. It's affordable. It's more affordable here than in other places. You have established yourself with an identity through baseball primarily, but also just your growth and development has put you on the map. Goodyear's a community with the designation of assured water supply, and that is a very good thing out here, obviously, so that's positive. In terms of weaknesses, right now there's still a perception that all the fun, good stuff is over, in, that's a technical term, in the East Valley, and the West Valley is still short on entertainment offerings and the like. And so as West Valley really starts to get critical mass, you're going to start to be able to support more and more higher-end critical mass of destination developments and elements like restaurant, higher-end retail and restaurant, entertainment, and hotel and conference space. And then there's a weakness of the perception about Arizona water supply, but the reality, of course, we know is a strength. In terms of opportunities, as I mentioned, if this project or something like it were to happen, it will help anchor your development right outside these doors. Without it, there's going to feel like there's something missing. When we talk, we used to say Hunt and Strategic Partners stood for host, stay, and play. It's the hosting part. You really aren't able to host visitors to your community in a full-service, elevated way right now. So they may be able to come and enjoy all of your restaurants and shops that are in existence and coming down the pike for you. But if they don't have somewhere to stay, you're really cutting that opportunity short, and you're leaking that spending to surrounding area communities. And so in order to capture that and have more pre and post activity spend, you want to be able to have them overnight. Same reason casinos give away hotel rooms at their casinos, because they know the longer someone's there, they're going to spend money in their different casinos and restaurants and entertainment. In terms of threats, so if the development here was not of high quality surrounding the hotel, that would hurt you in terms of attracting a higher quality hotel project to this site. So again, if everything's to be elevated, you want it more densified, you want high quality materials, interior and exterior materials. You don't want it to feel like a suburban shopping strip mall. You want it to feel like something more like Kierland Commons or something like that, right? So all of those things will play into it. And so that quality will influence the quality that you're going to be able to get out of this project as well. We have some other things. I wouldn't say that VAI or VI, I really don't know how to pronounce it. I have to apologize. When that happens, that is such a different world, sort of like the wigwam is so different than what we're talking about, that we see those are ships passing in the night. Those are not directly competitive. What you're going to be doing is something that's going to be creating a different market here that's a step up from where you are, but it's not trying to be the Taj Mahal either. And the other threats are, I mean, there are, of course, an existing number of hotels with conference space in East Valley. I think this is as much of an opportunity as a threat, the fact that there's really not that much out here. So you can establish yourself as like the place out in this part of the metro area that actually has those things. Let's see, so just more headlines. This is more of the same, essentially. One thing that I'll mention that I think is important is that your existing hotels in this area are very limited service. And so you've got plenty of hotel rooms and hotel supply, but it's all the same ilk. It's not that elevated, fuller service, or even what we would call select service on steroids with all those nice bells and whistles that you want. And you don't have those brands either. So you've got a lot of select service and limited service brands at this time. So that's something that you can differentiate through this project. And then retail, right now you're lacking compelling retail opportunities, but this whole vision of what's to become of this site really should change that. So those are some of the things that I would mention there. Just to sort of reiterate one of the big strengths, I love this map because it shows you the urban boundary, if you will, or the development boundary and how it's changing. So these orange areas are new, orange-yellow, are newly developed areas in the last 10, 12 years, basically. And so you can see it's going, basically in opposite directions, and you're right in the thick of it. So Goodyear is at north and south, and the expansion, the more you kind of become central to a population base, the better. Like you know, 10 years ago, you were kind of the western boundary of where that development was happening. Now you're not. That's good for you because your drive times now are stronger in terms of your capturable drive time market. So all these things are good because you're becoming more of a central location in the West Valley, so you're easier to access for more people. Now, this may be hard for you to read. It's certainly hard for me to read. But what this talks about are just some of the West Valley attractions, visits, and visitors to various entertainment and sports venues. And so you can see there that the Goodyear Ballpark is on the list there. And my eyes are good enough that I can see that that's number 11. And you get about 200,000 visits per year. And so we actually have to switch the column headers around. But the number of visits and visitors is about 200,000. So that's a big calling card for you all. In terms of the conference the conference center and hotel meetings market, in the entire area of the metro, there are 25 or more conference hotels with between 10 and 35,000 net square feet. Only 2 of these are within 15 miles of where we're sitting today. So again, as you'll see on the map on the next slide, almost all of these are to the east. And the other sort of opportunity is there are very few properties in this range that offer over 10,000 square feet of contiguous ballroom space. So they may have a total of a lot of space, but it's chopped up into smaller pieces. And what people want these days, one of the things I wanted to mention is that meeting planners and event planners, they want flexibility. So you may have a big ballroom, but you want that divisible into 5 or 6, different divisions, so you can have multiple ongoing events or flip the room or do different things. And then your meeting rooms, if you have a bank of meeting rooms, you can join those all together for a small, what we call a junior ballroom. Oh, we've lost power. Oh, here, we're back. Okay, fantastic. So anyway, so the average function space is 18,000 square feet. Average room count is 270. So these are pretty robust compared to most markets that we work in terms of, there are many in the area, but again, not too many around here. So here's a map, and you can see there hotels in red, conference and or event venues in sort of that dark blue, and then resorts in green. Almost everything skews to the east. So I think that's just, where you sit, you would be new territory a little bit, other than the VI that is underway. So in terms of the group business, we actually looked at the performance of a lot of these hotels and conference centers. They're essentially hotel conference centers. Some of them are mini resorts and that kind of thing. And how busy are they? So luckily, we now have the ability to get this information. We didn't used to. So first on the right is the Wigwam. So this is the one that's closest to you, and it's very large, obviously, and it's very lovely. And it's not necessarily, like I said, what you're trying to compete against, because that would be, too large and just not viable. But they do a good job. They get over 500 annual events. Average attendance is 231 per, and average space utilization is 10,000 square feet. So that is significant compared to the average of these 25 other, or not 25, I think there are about 10 that we were able to pull data from. 186 average annual events, 166 average attendance, and 5,000 average space utilization. That's more standard. These are not super tanker conference center hotels like the Wigwam is. In terms of the hotel market, we actually looked at your local hotel market, because that, I said, is limited service, it's not going to be as comparable as what these other competitive conference hotels are doing. And so we really ran numbers on the comp set that represents who you're truly going to compete with in this realm, other than for a local, if somebody really wants to stay locally and they want to have a step up, they'll stay here. So that's when you'll compete with your local limited service product. But for the most part, for conferences, you're going to be competing with these folks over here. So we have a lot of stats on that. And overall, certainly the market continues to grow. There's a lot of good news in the market. So supply has gone up by 6% in the last 7 years, but demand has gone up 6.7%. So that means occupancy is up because there's more demand than supply over that time. And average daily rates have gone up by 3.5%. Now, you wouldn't think that that's that outstanding, but you have to remember we had the pandemic in there, and this just goes through 2022. We had some year-to-date through 2023, but we didn't want to sort of mix a half year in there in this particular graphic. And then revenue per available room, which is when you take occupancy times rate, that's up by 4%. So all very strong. So the fact that you're growing your supply this much and you're increasing everything else is really good. So for meetings hotels, what's really interesting, especially in this post-COVID environment where weekday travel has really taken a hit, this is where these hotels perform the best, is during the weekdays. And so that's a nice complement to all the other hotels that tend to do better on the weekends for leisure travel and social business and that kind of thing. So what we see here is a nice bump during Tuesday and Wednesday, and a lot of conferences actually move in on Sundays. As many of you know who attend conferences, that's the weakest night in the hotel business, so hotels are always trying to get conferences to start on a Sunday so that they can fill those Sunday nights. So this is all very helpful information. And then we have a hotel pipeline here that shows that there's a lot in the hopper that's been developed and opened over time, and there's a few more upcoming. What I will say is with interest rates and construction costs being the way they are, a lot of commercial development activity has kind of come to a halt, except in rare cases. So we'll see that pick up once interest rates start to go down, but even in the hottest markets like Nashville and Austin, you don't see tower cranes anymore. So we're in hopefully just a temporary period of tough times for commercial development, but you're still seeing things be developed and open, and especially those limited and select serve hotels. So in terms of our recommendations, so this is actually a fairly robust development that we're recommending here, 240 rooms with a 12,000 square foot ballroom. Remember, again, we said a lot of the competition doesn't have anything contiguous over 10,000 square feet, and so this would give you a leg up there. A junior ballroom of 6,000 square feet divisible by 5, another 3 meeting rooms. So in total, you would have 14 divisions of this, so a lot of flexibility. Indoor restaurant and outdoor rooftop event and food and beverage space to really take advantage of the views and the weather and all of those things. And what we actually typically like to do in our projects with rooftops is sort of have a three sort of sets of spaces. So there's a totally enclosed space on the roof. There's a sort of quasi-indoor-outdoor covered in case we have inclement weather like this, and then there's a totally outdoor space. That way you can sort of, again, be flexible for the weather conditions. Parking. Now this is one where we really would want you to have a shared parking scenario set up with your developers, because 420 spaces is a lot. And of course you can stack those as we have drawn, but it's usually 1-to-1 per key in a hotel, so 240 just for the hotel itself, and then for those larger events, another 180. So to the extent that we could squeeze down that cost and the number of spaces by doing shared parking, that would be ideal for the feasibility cost and that kind of thing. So this was, so we had Convergence Design, who works with us a lot on these kinds of things, draw up what this conference center, hotel, roof deck, and parking structure could look like. Obviously, this could go at 100 different ways, but this was just a high-level pass to start to get spacing, sizing, capacity, construction costs, all these kinds of things. As you know, any sort of development now is a lot more expensive than anybody would like, and so some of these numbers may be more than anybody wants to see, want them to be, but that is what it is today. So Lucas put together some scenarios for this sort of a base case, a lower performance case, and a higher performance case. And what you see there in the blue is the base case at 71% stabilized occupancy and year 3 average daily rate. So the price per key to stay in a hotel room is $215. Number of events and estimated construction costs of $117 million. based on a lot of existing conditions in the marketplace, supportable private financing is lower than the cost to develop, which is going to be true for anything that's elevated like this. And so you have the estimated funding gap there on the right. Obviously, there are lots of permutations, combinations, and scenarios we can run for this to play with those feasibility gap numbers. Today, though, I think what the headline truly is that this is a project that makes sense in terms of who you want to be when you grow up as this center of town. And then the real question for, I would say, the next phase is, given that this would generate $26 million in local taxes over the next 20 years, how can we get the impact and the feasibility gap to be closer together and come up with a business plan with an appropriately experienced developer to give you something that is going to be bespoke, that is going to be making you proud, and all of those types of things. So that's where we are. We think it's a good idea to pursue, continuing the conversation and the analysis to get into that business planning and next steps and the advisory that goes along with it. But that's where we end up today. I think this is the last slide. Yes. So then the next steps would be really, it's the sausage making, right? It's figuring out the deal. What makes the most sense for both the public and private sectors, do a developer solicitation process, work with the landowners, and then get into the actual development. None of those things are easy or inexpensive, but you got to start, and you got to, one step at a time. But this could be a several-year process to get this thing up and running, but no time like the present. So we're very. And what did I miss?
If you want to go back to that slide. So just a little bit more about these net new taxes. That's
Yes.
$26 million after cannibalization, after substitution. These taxes would not have been generated if not for this project. And one thing that this doesn't capture is the ability of this hotel and conference center to be a catalyst for additional development. So because this hotel's there, because this conference space is there, now there's a new restaurant and there's a new housing development, all which generally would outweigh these tax benefits just on site. So this is more than just a hotel that's going to generate taxes to the city. This is something that can change the city and provide that node that allows people to identify Goodyear as this place that you can come Monday through Sunday for a conference, for events, just to bring your family as well.
It will also help you with office. Office is challenged right now, but in terms of supporting office development, having a high-quality hotel nearby is good for attracting tenants to office spaces.
And earlier we showed you performance of the Wigwam versus the competitive set, showing that the Wigwam basically is double everyone else. And that's really because they're the only game in town. You want to meet in this side, you can't go anywhere else but them. But they're really at capacity. So it's just whoever's going to be the second person to make the move to bring that property to the market. And the longer you wait, the further you are behind. So I think it's a now or never, or it's a great opportunity, long story short, for Goodyear.
We ready for questions?
Let's do it.
Go ahead, Sherry.
First of all, thank you for a very, very thoughtful and presentation that has a lot of facts and figures and a lot of very good information. I support this 110%. I've wanted to see something like this for a long, long time here. I do have a couple questions. I think you make a really good point about the Wigwam. I know we've tried to book events there and it's been double or triple booked when you try to get there. There's no parking. So I would like us to be the ones who are next before Alvarado gets something like this to our neighbors. I would like to make sure we're the ones that are next on track. How would your thoughts be, and what have you seen for adding something along the performing arts, partnering with this, or as part of it? I know I stayed in a hotel in New York where we saw Beetlejuice. It had the theater inside the conference center hotel. What are your thoughts on something like that?
So, again, permutations, combinations of this idea have been tried and done in different places. Again, the more flexible that, say, performance space can be, the better. But anything that's performing arts, whether it's commercial entertainment or Broadway or anything like that, it's got a very, very high cost. Mm-hmm. And the viability of something like that is going to be likely much more difficult than the hotel. just, so 1 + 1 may not equal 3 in that case.
Yeah.
It might equal 3 in terms of feasibility gap, but not necessarily. And yes, there would be, I think, synergy in there, you know, if, to the extent that you hosted events, but that was not part of our study.
Okay.
I would love, I mean, you know, we will always like to be busy doing our work, so if there's more that you want us to study on that question, we'd be happy to do it, but there's a big difference between, say, being able to host a Broadway show, which is, you know, very tough.
Or even just a band.
Okay, a local band.
Local band
or
or
a regional band.
regional theater company, community theater along
Mm-hmm.
those lines, you know.
Yeah, so again, it just depends on where on the spectrum we are in terms of, like, can they sell tickets? You know, community theater is more of a, sort of like a rec center. It's a benefit for the locals, but is it generating a lot of impact or spending or bringing people in from out of town? Typically not. But if you're trying to get into like what the casinos do with those kind of acts, you know, and you've got $100,000 to drop on, you know, whomever it is, and some of the guys coming through there now are just amazing because they were so big when I was younger. But but yeah, so I would just say that's a different kettle of fish. And again, happy to have an offline conversation if we want to amend and do some other work. Happy to do it. But yeah, that's kind of been outside the bailiwick.
So
of
that could
this
be
one.
more of a synergy on another parcel, maybe close to this.
Yes.
Would be a benefit rather than part of this. Is it probably a better?
Yeah, and listen, the more adjacent they can be, the better. Like, and there are examples where these things are attached, you know, in different places around the country. So I would just say, study it hard, you know, if that's a real idea that, and I believe this came up at the kickoff, you know, there was some notion about doing some sort of entertainment or performing arts. So again, we're happy to jump into that. The last thing we want to do is have you do a Thelma and Louise off the cliff with
No.
like, hey, what a great idea, but it's going to cost a fortune. So let's study it and figure out, you know, how those would best, you know, A, what's the best facility that would do the best? And then how close do you want to sidle it up to the hotel conference center or even attach it so that there could be synergy there?
Okay, and I really do like the idea, it said spa in there, so something like this would have a spa.
We saw that on the photo.
Yeah, I
on
saw
the
that because our
drawings.
closest one
Yeah.
really is Wigwam, or you gotta go to Scottsdale to
Right.
get the actual spa experience. So
Yeah.
I really think that is good, so I do like those amenities for the community, so I do support this, and I really think we need to continue to study it, or whatever the next step is to
Okay.
kind of move forward. That would be my position. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah, thank you.
Brandon?
No, I agree as well. Thank you for the work, hard work, and putting it all together. I was curious on the feasibility, the return on investment, and it looks like you were able to show that there is a demand for it here. It can work, and that we can get a return on the investment, and then some plus to create more jobs, more tax revenue, and a different base of people in the area here, and then more beds, heads and beds, so we can keep
Yeah.
people.
And what I'll tell you is, just so that everybody's clear, so for all projects like this right now, because of construction costs and interest rates, the market is viable for it, but then what it costs to build it versus what you could sell it for today if you had to build it and sell it, there is that gap. So you'd have to participate upfront to lure a developer to do, you know, something that's strong. So as long as everybody's clear on that,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think I saw that the difference was the delta in the
Yeah, so
the estimated funding gap,
Yep.
so yeah, so whatever that ends up, or could be, but it looks like the projected revenue from it could close that gap up.
Right, if you can essentially recapture those tax benefits
Yeah.
that it's generating, or if there's sort of we do a lot of incremental tax recapture districts, to the extent that state law allows you to do that, you know, a lot of that could be recaptured, or you could abate or rebate different local taxes and things like that to make the feasibility closer.
And I
Okay.
want to reemphasize his mention of participation up front, and I think that's where you're going at.
Yeah.
Once this is operational, there are likely no other funds needed to keep this as a hotel.
Right, it's just to cover the development cost.
Yeah, it'll self-sustain,
Yeah.
won't be supplemented by us for forever, anything like that.
Correct.
Yeah, it should be self-funded.
Yep.
Okay, no, I really appreciate it. Like I said, I am also in support of it. It's something that I brought up at in the past when we were first talking about this, because I definitely see a demand for this in the area, especially, for example, the wigwam being the only thing in the area, and it always being busy and
Yeah.
really no other options.
And that's a good sign, though. If
It
it's
is.
so
The demand-
busy,
the
that
demand's
means
there.
there's more
Yeah.
excess demand.
Yeah, and I see that, so, yeah, I think it'd be a great addition to the city. I think having it here and a part of our vision for that area with either more parking garages and entertainment and things that would happen in that area there in our city, at the city hall and all those kind of things would be a great place for it, I think, as well. So, yeah, I'm on board with it. Yeah, whatever the next steps are to move forward, I'd be in favor, at least keep moving it forward to look, to see what the next, is any more hurdles or things like that to overcome. But, and this would be, I think you answered some of the questions I had. So this isn't a small conference center, like Avondale has like a Holiday Inn or something with like a little conference center. And so that's a lot smaller, obviously. It's more of a Renaissance style or wigwam style size areas with the spa and things like that. So,
Well, this 12,000 square feet, it definitely is smaller than the wigwam, but it is larger and higher quality than most of the competitors that are out there. And so it certainly would not be a Holiday Inn. It
Yeah.
would be
I
a
forget.
brand that is elevated beyond the Holiday Inn.
Garden Inn or whatever those are over there.
Yeah. Sometimes we do call them select serve on steroids because it is a little bit less expensive to build out the FF&E, the furnitures, fixtures, and equipment and materials cost for, say, a Courtyard or a Hilton Garden Inn that you put on steroids with all the bells and whistles, the spa and all that, versus, say, doing maybe a diluted or a full-service light. We've done them both ways. So like in Erie, Pennsylvania, we did a Sheraton that had, like, it was light. It was diluted down a little bit in terms of cost, but it still had the Sheraton nameplate. Other places like Fort Wayne, Indiana, and so many others, they did the 250-room Courtyard with a ballroom, a Starbucks, a Champs, a pool, ballroom and meeting rooms right next to the ballpark in town, downtown. So, and it's kicked butt and taken names. So, you can kind of go either way, but that's the point of what happens in the developer solicitation and selection process. So in terms of next steps, we would say it's sort of what I call that business planning, to run through a lot of machinations with the sensitivity analysis like Lucas has started to do, and really try to start talking to those developers again and figuring out, okay, if we put this on the street, how are they going to respond to this? So we want to figure that out. It's like you don't go into a council meeting until you've counted the votes beforehand, so you know how it's going to go, right? That's how we want to do it, the developer solicitation process. We want to know how they're going to respond before we even drop something on the street. So then the next step would be to put something on the street that they all respond to with their qualifications and proposals. And then that's where you get into, they're going to tell you like what things are going to cost and what the quality is and what they're proposing. And you may say, hey, I want a spa. And they'll say, well, add another $3 million or whatever the case may be. So,
A la carte.
but that's kind of the process I would recommend.
No, that sounds great. And I'm sure the city will help us figure out if we were to move forward with that, how we would fund that. If it's bonding or whatever,
Yep.
whatever the source would be.
Yeah, and there are different ways to skin that cat,
Yeah.
which we can talk about. Yeah.
I'm sure you have a lot of examples of how other
Yep.
places have done it, so I'm sure it's not, we're not creating the wheel.
You're not starting
So,
from scratch.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, thank you.
Before you go to the bill, I've got a couple concerns. First, the return on investment. Your delta 70 million in today's dollars versus 28 million in 20 years. If I was a private investor, I'd be a little concerned about
Yep.
that return. Second concern I have is with the city attorney, how we would justify $70 million without violating the gift clause, because there's certain cases out there, number one, that have been, that have attacked local governments where we can't do the sales tax rebates anymore as a result of some of those cases. So, yeah, I'm a numbers guy, so when I see 70 million out, 28 million in 20 years, that kind of bothers me, considering that we have a lot of projects that we're talking about right now to come up with. This isn't the only one on the board. So I just want to throw that out before I throw it to Bill. Go ahead, Bill.
I thought you were waiting for an answer from the attorney on the gift.
No, I'm sure he'll come up with one at some point.
Oh, so this is putting him on notice. You got time to think about one.
Yeah, there's no doubt it's got more is more difficult environment recently, but I think there's some different models that we could look at.
While you have your mic on, how does this differentiate between what we're currently talking about and what happened in both Peoria and, I think, Surprise, but I think Peoria was the big pusher of the public-private, wasn't really private.
The Shires,
Wasn't
the
really
Huntington,
public,
yeah.
yeah.
Again, as I say, it's a more difficult environment these
Yeah.
days.
Okay. You know, what I was showing Vicky was, I got the heart rate alert on my watch.
Settle down, Bill.
Yes, I'm laughing.
When we got to the
Hey,
finance
check
law,
this
is that
out.
what it is?
Um, So I'm going to go right back to the old days of being the absolute naysayer on this whole thing, and I know it's not a surprise to anybody sitting here, but, you know, you guys talked about, well, whoever's the second person out of the gate on this thing behind the wigwam will be the winner. And we are nowhere near being the second person out of the gate with VIA coming online and Desert Diamond Casinos. Those two projects in Glendale are going to scoop up a huge number of this capacity that you are really talking about. And it's nowhere in this presentation that we saw, and it was very hard for me to tease out of the 106-page report to say how does the actual, these other, we talk about it as a threat, but we don't really talk about it from a true numbers perspective. And how does that go? So we think we're going to be the second, we think we're going to strike while the iron's hot, and we're going to be the second ones out the gate. But we could end up being number 4. And now we've spent $120 million, and we've got an empty conference center. So I'm concerned very much about that. The other thing that we've not talked about is really the actual use of the other local facilities. For example, what is going on at Desert Diamond? We talked a lot about Wigwam as a quote-unquote competitor to this, but the Renaissance Hotel is exactly what you're talking about. And we don't have any, there's no comparison in any way in this presentation about the Renaissance Hotel. And it's got ballrooms, it's got the, you know, the upscale hotel with the spa and all the rest of that, but all we've been talking about is Wigwam, Wigwam, Wigwam. So where do we fall in that particular regard? And then the third kind of component of that is the city of Avondale built a small conference center. The city built it, and from what I understand, it has essentially gone unused for the better part of the 2 years that it's been built. So if the small facility can't be used and it's been government funded, why do we think that one that people are going to have to pay for? So I'm really concerned about all of those pieces while we get wrapped up in the euphoria of we could be the first and this is going to be the, you know, the diamond and all that stuff. There's a real practical application to what we're talking about with this. You guys talked about the, you know, offices being a good driver. This will drive office space, et cetera. And we all know, and I know you guys do, about the trouble that office development is currently having. So whether or not we have a hotel, I think I don't want to say it's a false narrative because that infers that you guys are trying to do something nefarious, and I don't want to do that. But I think we have to be cautious of the narrative that, hey, doing this is going to help drive office, because the only thing that's going to drive office is people going to work. And right now, and for the last 4 years, that doesn't seem to be the case. Our public transit system is experiencing that. Our roadway networks are showing some of that. So I want to tamp down some of our excitement about some of this. And then to kind of get to the mayor's point, you know, every project that you listed in this report, over in Gilbert and those were all privately funded projects. None of them were a publicly funded or publicly partnered project. So what examples do we have where the government has been part of that? And even, and I know you guys just rattled off Pennsylvania and Indiana or something. What about here? Because this political environment, as, you know, we talked about these court cases, and they don't have the Goldwater Institute breathing down their neck. So before I get into the financial aspect, let's talk me off the, you know, talk my blood pressure down, talk my heart rate down. Tell me about this, and then I'll get into my financial questions.
Well, so, in terms of your blood pressure,
Yeah, go to the doctor.
you're right. No, what I would say is, these are not easy. They're not inexpensive, and you've noted the two big numbers, right, that are, you know, staring you in the face. This is a public policy decision about, you know, who you want to be, what you want to invest in, and the, you know, dollars are scarce, and you have to make priorities, right? And so it's certainly not our desire or job to tell you how to spend your money or where to invest it. What we are saying is, if you did undertake this, these are the numbers that exist as of today, and as some of you have noted, they're big and scary in many ways. And so the question is, do you want to continue to investigate how we could squeeze those down, make it, you know, tighter, better, easier, whatever, and make sure it doesn't violate the gift clause and do all those things? You know, I would also say, just to sort of mitigate a little bit of what Lucas said about second mover advantage, if you will, in a rapidly growing market like the Phoenix metro, and certainly out west here, there's going to continually be, it's not like you're a static situation where there's just room for one, and there are going to be different gradations of quality and size and all those kinds of things. And we know that you know, we didn't recommend a resort style of anything here. This is like, what's that next step up from where you are currently that would elevate who you are and what you want to be, that still gets you those amenities and the functionality and the function spaces that we think fit the marketplace, but it's not getting out over our skis too much and trying to be something that we're not and that we can't or no one could ever afford, knowing who you are right now. There's only so far you can go. So I think we're trying to be prudent, but there are also other ways to, again, I think, modulate the program and work with, you know, these next steps to figure out, well, what could be more worthwhile and make people less nervous about making a policy decision like this, so that, you know, it falls into a more comfortable parameter. Because we did, you know, 240 keys it's a lot of rooms in a hotel. We've seen plenty that are 150, 175, 180, and so again, we can play with all of those things and help move it into those next, like I said, it's sausage making, and you got to figure out how to get something out the other end that it's a little ugly while you're doing it, but you want something that you all can feel really good about. And that if at the end of the day you decide yes, then okay. And if you decide, you know what, it's just a bridge too far, then you don't. So I think our goal here is to just give you as much information as possible so that you can make a wise decision, an informed decision for you. Because the last thing we'd ever want you to do is, you know, jump into something that you're going to regret.
In the Vi Hotel, I'm pretty sure it's about 1,100 rooms. It's more of a resort-style hotel, similar to the Wigwam. So those kind of play into a different category than, you know, a conference hotel that we're talking about here. And then your mention about Avondale, if you go there, there's nowhere to eat. You can't walk anywhere. As a meeting planner, you look for somewhere that is the end destination, that is, you know, the host stay and play, as well as eat. And that's what this project hopes to be, more so than what Avondale has there.
Yeah, and is that run by the city? Or is it run privately? Because that's the other thing that you want to, like, be aware of is we would recommend, obviously, that this is a private enterprise that's competitive in the private market, You know, any sort of publicly run venue is often going to run into trouble for the very reasons that we know about publicly run venues.
And I think that was kind of my point in raising that for this is we heard, you know, through the course of the presentation, and if, as, you know, in the data sets, there was a lot of talk about the, I think it was the Kiwanis Club or somebody needing a small space, and, you know, and that's all great, and they would be the ones to use it. Certainly the city of Avondale's, I'm going to call it conference center, and I'm going to do that with air quotes, was intended to be that space for those small, the small group.
Lower price point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's great, but if it hasn't been utilized yet in the course of 2 years, and I'm sure that it's very inexpensive to rent if I'm a small, local, you know, nonprofit group, then I think us using that as the reason for our facility, it seems to be, that seems to be counterintuitive. So if we're
Yeah.
sticking with, what's the phrase, sleep,
Host, stay, play.
host, stay, play, if that's the key, then let's talk about that. Let's talk about that aspect of it and leave the Kiwanis Club and all the rest, let's leave
Yeah.
that off the table. Because all that does is confuse the real decision-making that needs to happen. And I think you hit on it exactly, as this is really about a private entity. We can say yes all day long, as long as somebody else is going to build it. If George is going to pay for it and George is going to fund it and they're going to bring in, I saw you, George, otherwise you were off the hook.
His blood pressure's going up now, so be careful.
But if, get your Apple Watch out. But if they were fitting all the bill, I'd sit here and say, yeah, go for it.
Right.
But there's an ask on the table for
Right.
$70-some million of public funds. So
Yep.
now I got to go, all right, well, what's the basis of my decision? And is that strong environment? So, you know, we don't, if the idea is we pay it, somebody else runs it, then I think we're going to have probably some issues with the public financing aspect of it and, you know, going forward with that. And I'll leave, my last thought is this. Look, if this is what we want to do, and we are really good, and myself included, are really good at coming up with great ideas. Last week, we sat in here and we listened to Brandon ask about us purchasing 40 acres so that we can have a place. We don't know what it is, but it's a place. So we got 40 acres. We've got performing arts that we talked about. Now we've got the, you know, $70 million for this hotel. And then we've got the other, I'm going to say real infrastructure, which is our GSQ-related infrastructure that we have either A, already committed to do, or B, really want to do to get the rest of that parcel moving along, plus the unbonded road projects that we have on our list, which is another $100 million worth of stuff. And last but absolutely not least is phase 2 of the GRC. So if we're going to say yes to this, and we know that the price tag is $70 million, boy, we ought to have a list of what all of those other pipe dreams are that we've got, and look at that number in its totality and really understand what we are saying yes to before we say yes tonight. I think that's kind of where I want to leave that at. Conceptually, I'm 100% behind this. Kicking in city dollars, I think we're not necessarily in a position, at least in my mind, that I want to throw 70 at it, because I'd rather spend 70 on road projects, and I'd rather spend 70 on phase 2 of the GRC, or towards what we've got to do for GSQ right now, and let George and Red and the rest of those guys figure out how to entice a quality individual to come in and take this load, and then have that conversation before we just say, yeah, here's the check, we'll just sign it.
Good. Vice Mayor?
I really appreciated the comprehensive report that you wrote. I read it twice, and I liked all the extensive interviews that you did with all the stakeholders, and I thought you were fair on the SWOT analysis. And I think you get us, who we want to be, that we want to be uplifted, we want to do something special. In my comments, I don't really want to get into the sausage making, because that's certainly where things are going to get much more complicated, but it seems how you feel about this particular project or doing something, some kind of big splash in our GSQ downtown probably coincides in your faith in the whole project overall. We've cast big dreams, and do we really have faith that those dreams will come to pass? And I had the opportunity to work at the Phoenix Convention Center during their expansion project when they left being the old Civic Plaza. And of course, that was a big deal, and they had a hotel and lots of problems that came with that. However, there were unforeseen circumstances such as the recession and then even legislative action that caused other conventions to boycott Arizona. So there's always an element of risk. But I think Phoenix and whatever we choose to support, you have to play a long game. You have to have a long view, because maybe in the short term it doesn't make sense, but it all goes back to what do you want to be when you grow up. I also worked downtown Phoenix when Red Development came in to take Patriots Park, which was generally something you just avoided at all cost, and made it into something that was walkable and dynamic, interactive, called City Center. And it truly became the city center of Phoenix. So we're very fortunate that we have Globe and Red leading this charge to GSQ. And I think that we have a growing identity as something special. All the heat maps are pointing to West Valley. I mean, things are slowing up. Maybe in other parts of the country, but Phoenix is still real strong, and the West Valley, everything shows that things are going well. And we are a baseball town with a Major League Baseball, certainly with Perfect Game. And there's also a possibility that we might even have some upcoming retail tourism, which would draw people here as well. So Goodyear has plenty to offer. I mean, GSQ, the phase 1 is well on its way. Everything's moving and shaking with that. I think we've got a good vision. I think certainly the finances, whether this is the particular project that's going to make the most sense, is going to depend upon a lot of things, certainly the money. I think Bill makes a good point. We probably should put on a whiteboard all the things we want, because realistically we aren't going to be able to do them all. But I think it's important to keep this conversation going with Red, with Globe, just to see what's going to make sense for us as we're casting the vision, and we're going to have to figure for ourselves what we want to be when we grow up. So I don't know, it was a very, very interesting presentation. I'm glad we did this study. I think it was very helpful, very realistic, and it's a big deal, it's a big jump, but I think that or something comparable, it would make a great anchor for our whole downtown project.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, Bill, to answer your question, the city of Avondale runs their conference center, because I've looked into it many times. I'm in a lot of organizations, and I'm always going out of the West Valley to book my venue, because I have to have a space that will hold 650 to 1,000 people, and I just don't have any here. Pebble Creek, the max I can get in there is 310 seated, 350 standing up. And at the Wigwam, the max I can get in their room is 625 in the main ballroom. So the West Valley does not have wedding venues, anything of that sort for us. So and the Avondale facility is only 2,331 feet, and it rents for $45 an hour. If you want the whole facility, it's $85. None of the conferences that I go to would even look at that to rent. So we go to Mesa, we go, let's see, in fact, I'm going to Mesa next month for the weekend for a big women's conference. And we've gone to Scottsdale, we go all over, but we try to stay in this area. We don't want to go to Tucson or anywhere else. So I've always had a vision of Goodyear having a conference center sometime, because I'd like to see us draw conferences here. And I mean, it can be any kind of a conference. It could be the school board conference. It could be the Rainbow Girls. It could be anything. But we don't have the facility for it. We don't have the meeting spaces for it. And I just really, I think what we're doing for the center is wonderful. It's really coming to fruition. It's making the residents proud that we're trying to put a downtown together. And I agree with the vice mayor. We need to keep this conversation alive. Whatever, we're not going to say no forever, because we don't, maybe something will happen that we can see our feet doing it. But again, 12,000 feet for a conference center isn't very much.
That'll get you $750 at sit-down rounds.
750?
Yeah.
Well, I
And-
might
and-
book it.
Yeah, and then, and theater style, you'll get 1,000.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I'm in an organization that we put on a luncheon once a year, and we're max at 350 unless we go out of the West Valley. We try to keep it West Valley because it's affiliated with City of Hope. It was Cancer Treatment Centers. And we have to cut it off, and we have, 150 people that want to come in addition. We have no place to put them. So, but when we do our Super Ball, we go to Chateau Lux. And we pay a lot of money for it, but Chateau Lux could take care of us. And I'd like to see Goodyear having that, because the vibe that's coming in Glendale, that's going to be a different clientele than what we're looking for, because I think it's going to be very expensive to stay at that hotel. I don't think you're going to find any $150 to $250 rooms, from what I gathered. And in talking to the gentleman that was doing the Mattel part, he seemed to agree with me that it's going to be very expensive to stay there. It'll be like a vacation, huh?
Like Great Wolf Lodge?
Yeah, like great. Yeah, it's just very expensive, and we want to be able to, we want to be something for everybody. We'd really like to have something. So I think if there's some way we can down the road figure this out, I think it's a wonderful opportunity for us. And it does anchor this area. And you're right about the performing arts. I want a performing arts more than anything, but I'd like to see them separated, because if it's in the conference center, you're giving away some of the opportunity for you to lease out for something else. It's only for a one-night venue, and if you don't sell out or whatever, you're going to lose a little money. Might lose a lot of money. But I do want us to think maybe we can put a conference center somewhere else in this area. But I don't know which is first, the horse or the what, So, but I do appreciate your summary, and you're right. Whenever you were here before with Mayor Lord, we talked about this. We were excited about it, and we also said we wanted a performing arts, but we didn't necessarily say we wanted a conference center and a performing arts as one. So thank you for this, and I hope we'll continue the conversation.
Very good.
I don't know how to pay for it, but we'll figure it out. I'll open a lemonade stand, George. Yeah, I'm selling good.
Do you have anything?
I hate to just say something if everything's been said, but I tend to agree with Bill and Joe. It bothers me the amount of money going out to the money coming in. I think I want something like this. But like Laura said, I think we need to pursue a little more talk about this first, so we know exactly where that's going, because that does bother me. $70 million is a lot of money.
It is.
With everything else we're putting out as a growing city right now. And we have to make sure that we can tell our constituents that and make sense of it. And sometimes they aren't all in agreement to all this. And I think we have to think about that. So I'd like to talk more about it. It's something I am interested in, but I want to talk more about it, like Laura said, on the whiteboard, and start figuring out where the money coming in is going to come from, how much is going to come in. That $70 million scares me.
Well, I'll just close it up before we move on to the next one, is to say that my biggest concern, first of all, I'm a numbers guy, so I always like a return on investment. And 70 million in current value versus 28 million 20 years from now. If I was investing some money, I would be a little hard pressed for that. But with that being said, we have so many things on the board right now. We've got some infrastructure that we want to put in GSQ that's going to take this road all the way to board that we're working on. We've got a couple recruits we're looking for. That's going to cost probably some money to bring in. We've got a major thing we're working on right off of 101, right off of 10. That's going to need some infrastructure. We've got road work, as Bill mentioned, several hundred millions of dollars in there. So, you know, it kind of reminds me of the champagne taste in a beer pocketbook. We got to make sure that we list it all up on the board. I don't have a problem discussing it further, but we got to make sure with all of the things that we have prioritized-wise, what is it, where the money's going to go? You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of things we've got on the table right now that we want to do, and it's in the hundreds of millions of dollars when you add it all up. Go ahead.
So thank you, everyone. I appreciate the conversation. Overall, what I heard as far as consensus is go back to the whiteboard, see if we can close a gap, but continue to have conversations. It may or may not work out, but continue the conversations and see where we can get. And,
Seems you got it.
all right, thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you. How about a 10-minute break before we bring up the next one? We good?
Sounds good.
All right, thank you. You're up. Here's Bill.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Manny Delgado. I am the presiding judge of the Goodyear Municipal Court, and I am here to provide you with the State of the Court address with my full 3 months of experience. Fortunately, I have my court administrator here, Crystal Whelan, and she's going to assist me, and she knows that court better than anybody in here, I'm sure. Just to let council know, we did submit the full executive report as well. We're going to be discussing the fiscal year 2023 and some status on some higher priority issues. As well as, you know, the council tasked me with one of my goals in my employment contract to look at the policies, procedures, processes. So we're going to be talking about those issues as well. So if we would just go ahead and start with the charge filings in comparison from 2023 and 2022. If you look at that bar chart there, you can see that the misdemeanor non-traffic cases have gone up. Domestic violence increased as well. The DUIs increased. Now, we did have a decline in the criminal traffic matters that went down slightly. As well, the civil traffic is probably the largest decline. If you notice, pretty steep decline there. What's that attributed to, I couldn't tell you. But back in 22, the court was at 5,968 filings, and compared to the 4,801 for this particular year. The local non-criminal ordinances have also gone down. The protective orders increased slightly. The total filings, if you look at the comparison, not a whole lot of a change between 2022 and 2023. Again, majority of that looks like it was a large decline in the civil traffic. Not sure, again, what that is attributed to. So just to talk a little bit about access to justice and where the court's going with respect.
Quick question for you, Judge. Criminal traffic, is that the ones over 20? What's criminal traffic?
Yes, over 20.
Okay.
So it'd be those speed limits over 20 miles an hour in the speed limit zone.
Okay. You know that? Okay. Only reason why I ask is that seems to be one of our biggest concerns right now of our residents about the racers and the speed racers in the community. So I'm just kind of curious where that's all kind of going there. So.
Yeah, and it didn't go down extensively. It went down some, and I can tell you that being in the courtroom, I see a lot of those cases still coming in.
Okay.
So there's a lot of charges with respect to the criminal speed. It's good or bad, I couldn't tell you, but they're there.
We're hoping to slow it down a little bit out there because unfortunately we've had a few people killed as a result of the
Right.
racing. So. Okay.
Yes, I've seen a couple of those come across my bench as well, so
Okay.
unfortunately. In terms of access to justice, one thing that I wanted to advise counsel of is that during the prior administration, the judge wasn't always available a full workday, several days out of the week, and the court was not accepting walk-ins that required any kind of judicial review, not issuing order protections or injunctions if the judge wasn't present. Now, while you were all seeking a new presiding judge, the court again was not accepting walk-ins during the Friday afternoon hours. So we weren't looking at warrants, we weren't looking at injunctions, we weren't looking at order of protections. Staff was advised at that point to direct those residents to a different court. You would be glad to know that that practice is discontinued.
Great.
The court is serving our residents 5 days a week, and we're open during working hours, and we take orders right up to 4:30. So if anybody walks in, they're going to get service. They're not going to be sent to a different court. I would like to discuss as well with respect to pro tem hours. Our Friday dockets historically have been limited to setting order protection hearings that sort of comply with the rules for setting those orders. And there have traditionally not been dockets that were set on Fridays, and dockets especially that required the appearance of the prosecutor. So with respect to a pro tem, we're going to be adding, or we continued a pro tem to be with the court Fridays from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. Reason being, one, that is the day, Fridays, where I have my statewide presiding judges meetings. I also have my meetings with respect to the Judicial College of Arizona. So I have meetings that are set in that time frame. Additionally, because of our current caseload, I'm typically on the bench Monday through Thursday, from the start of the AM docket till the end of the PM docket, and it leaves little to no time for any administrative functions that I have to be completing during the normal work hours. So we're going to continue. It was a practice that had started with during the time frame that you all were seeking the presiding judge, to continue to have pro tem coverages from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Friday. So it's going to give me some time to do my administrative duties, but also we're going to use it to alleviate a Thursday docket. So on Thursdays, we got to the point where we were setting non-jury trials with compliance issues, and those two do not mix well. All it takes is one of those trials to go forward, and the next thing you know, you're going to have chaos. You're not going to complete your docket. So the idea is to move those, help the case flow, move those cases out of that Thursday docket into that Friday morning. And of course, Friday afternoons, I'm there. We're taking orders. We're doing injunctions. We're addressing warrants, whatever needs to be done during that process. With respect to automation, we've continued to use the DocuSign, and it's primarily being used to assist completing pleas by mail and out-of-state pleas. We're continuing to explore where else we can utilize that DocuSign, again, with an eye towards the future use of virtual proceedings, where it would be extremely vital. And with respect to those remote virtual proceedings, I know that those dockets are in the mind and the eye of council. And there's a movement statewide to start going to virtual proceedings. I think one thing that we have to note and understand is that under our current administrative order, our court is presumptively an in-person court. However, we as a court are continuing to explore where we can use the virtual court proceedings. I think it's also important to know that those are driven by the rules of criminal procedure. There are certain requirements that have to be fulfilled if you're going to conduct a virtual proceeding. The parties need to be able to see each other. The public needs to be able to see the proceedings. The parties need to be able to meet privately. It has to be recorded. These are just some of the requirements that have to be met if we're going to do the virtual proceedings. So where we are at presently, in order to continue down that road, it's going to require some investment in some hardware. It's going to require some investment in some bandwidth to be able to conduct the proceedings without interfering with our other proceedings. It draws a lot of the energy, so to speak. I'm not a techie guy, but it draws that availability and starts affecting the other staff members in terms of what they can accomplish. So we are conducting some order protection and injunction contested hearings virtually. And we are accomplishing that with the use of some laptops being placed in different areas. It's not the ideal methodology, but it is meeting the standards, and we're able to conduct those hearings when individuals can't show up. In terms of out-of-custody proceedings and virtual proceedings in general, so despite those challenges, I've had some conversations with the state, and we started discussing the use of virtual court dockets. In particular, those dockets would be limited to individuals who either are out of state, they're out of the county. We've done them out of the country before, but, and potentially those individuals that can't actually access the court because they have some type of medical condition or some physical issue that gives them a limitation in terms of showing up in person. The court's also evaluating the use of a platform called Court Call. That would allow the court to conduct in-custody proceedings, and if implemented, that would alleviate the load that the police are experiencing for having to transport those in-custody defendants over to the court, and it would save some costs associated with that. It's another virtual court proceeding or process that we're looking at. We continue, with respect to our court collaboration and partnerships, to participate in veteran court events. We're active in the Regional Homeless Court. Those are continuing efforts on the part of the court. Typically, what happens, especially in the regional homeless courts, is typically they're gonna reach a resolution in those courts, and then the Goodyear court would go out and carry that sentence out. We're still involved in the West Valley Regional Court. That court continues, we continue to participate in that. Recently, we renewed the IGA with the Glendale City Court, and the first graduates of the Veterans Court are set to come out in February. So that the way that the court is operating over there is they're going to actually send the defendants back to our court, and then we're gonna sentence them in accordance with whatever agreements they reach during the Veterans Court. We still do not know the actual cost associated with that. We haven't got a number from Glendale, but we're awaiting, and I've been told that it's supposed to be minimal, so we're still waiting to see how that's gonna work out. So due to, I'm gonna talk a little bit about the court-appointed attorneys. So due to the historic increase and anticipated increase in case filings, as well as changes to the rules of the criminal procedure, we've added 2 additional court-appointed attorneys. The one attorney that we added is going to be an advisory council. That's going to assist us with defendants who are in custody to try to reach a resolution to a case, because the way the rules have changed, anybody who's going to be held on bond in a case has to be appointed an attorney. So we have no choice. We have to appoint an attorney if they're going to be held on bond. So the second attorney is going to receive regular appointments and assist the defendants through the regular criminal process. It should also be noted that the Veterans Court and the veterans who are participating in the Veterans Court require an appointed counsel as well. We weren't anticipating that, but that's the way they're operating. So anytime that we do send an individual over to Veterans Court, they don't want them sent over without representation. So we're going to be appointing them counsel as well. Court compliance issues. So as you and we spoke during my interview process, I had indicated to you on a couple occasions that I needed to get into the court. I needed to evaluate what was going on. I needed to see where we were at before I could even tell you which direction we needed to move. And the court has provided a detailed report with respect to the changes that we've made and those that are in process. They should be right around pages 7 to 12. There are a lot of changes. One of the issues that I discovered when I took the bench and started hearing cases was we had some non-compliance issues. And what I mean by those are issues where the court may not have been utilizing documents or following processes or procedures, and so the court was out of compliance with rules and legislative changes. We are extremely fortunate. I can tell you I have got an amazing, experienced, knowledgeable supervisory team, and I have hit them with several changes. I'm sure that they want to sit back and take a breath, but these are some issues that we have to change and we need to address to get the court into compliance. But they've responded, and I know that we're gonna get the court in compliance. I'm not gonna go into detail about all the changes. I know that council asked me as part, again, the goals and my requirements for my contract to look at the processes, look at the procedures. So I'm gonna highlight some of them. A lot of them, again, are in the executive report. So since I've been there, I have reviewed virtually every court form that's utilized in the court processing their cases. I discovered there were some mandated forms which were not being used. Those forms are now in use or in process of getting implemented. Anytime you change a procedure, you're going to affect the court staff, you're going to affect the court operations. They have to be trained. They got to know what they're doing in the courtroom. But those processes are in place, and we're moving forward. I also discovered some advisory forms that were outdated. We're bringing those up to date, so we're getting those forms implemented in the court processing. Administrative orders, I took a look at all the administrative orders that have been, and they've been reviewed. Some of those orders are under modification and revision, obviously. One of the AOs that we're modifying now deals with civil traffic matters, specifically changes with respect to what the clerk is allowed to do up at the service window. So we're just updating those to make sure that they have the authority to go ahead and adjudicate some of those civil cases. Other changes that we're doing with respect to what I refer to as the bond card, also the fine schedule, is to reward compliance when an individual brings either their vehicle or their driving status into compliance. Instead of just reducing the fine, create an incentive so that if they're compliant, we're going to suspend the fine. Having said that, I'm also working on a procedure right now that we're going to have to deal with, where we were actually reducing fines when the statute didn't allow us to reduce fines. So I've just kind of seen the both of those issues, and we're dealing with them accordingly. A little bit about case flow. So we did implement a new administrative order to streamline the adjudication of criminal speed charges. Reason being, there's so many of them. And so these are the cases we typically see them at the criminal arraignment process. And so the AO was done in collaboration with the prosecutor's office. The prosecutor's office and the court have been in constant communication regarding proposed changes in court processes. Anytime that we are going to change something, the prosecutor is fully aware of where we're going and what needs to be changed, and they have their input. It's worked out. We have a great relationship, and I just see it getting better as we continue to address the issues. So the criminal arraignment calendar was extremely congested. It was difficult to manage. The docket was routinely going into the lunch hour. And then by the time that we finished processing cases, it would go to the processing window and go further into the lunch hour. So I was getting a lot of complaints from staff, pro tems. I was getting complaints from the prosecutors. So we implemented that administrative order. It's alleviated a lot of the congestion. I've also incorporated some group advisories and some individual advisories. That's helping expedite that process as well. With respect to those also address some concerns that came up in the court operation reviews. So there were some concerns about how the advisories were being made during the criminal arraignments and whether or not they were satisfactory. So we've dealt with that issue as well. I'm also recommending that we get that docket started a little bit earlier. We haven't addressed that issue yet. That has to do with calendaring. We'll get there. It's a work in progress, but I think we're moving in the right direction. With respect to the standard judgment and sentence forms, so these sentence forms are forms that are used across the board. We have basically almost like a universal one that gets used anytime we adjudicate the case and we're going to sentence an individual. So that has been revised. That was one of the first projects myself and staff or leadership took on. We went ahead and we've made the changes. They're now in compliant. They now reflect what the state's police has. And so those requirements are being reflected in that as well. The clerks are moving away from handwriting these documents now. So they are typing this up in the computer. We are moving towards that automation. So even if it's small steps, they're getting used to not writing everything down. We're trying to eliminate that. It's a small step. I know it's a future we want to get to, but we're starting small. We'll get there. They're just going to get used to it, and I'm sure once they do, it'll become second nature. Other changes that have resulted in addressing concerns raised in the last court operations review were with respect to protective orders. We've actually rewritten and implemented a new cover sheet checklist. That's important because the orders of protection injunctions, the judges use that checklist to issue the order and the clerks to generate the order. So it has improved the accuracy of the orders. Additionally, the plaintiffs, when they needed to modify a petition, were being sent back to the starting point, which is the AZ point. They would come in the courtroom, they'd have a change, or we'd have to develop, and I have to draw more facts in order to issue an order. They would be sent back to the AZ point start and then come back into the courtroom while they're waiting longer and having to duplicate their processes. So one of the priorities for us as a court is if you have an order of protection in your court, you're supposed to see that on a priority basis. You want to take that out of turn, so to speak, get that addressed and move them on. So this is helping with respect to moving up that process as well. The judge, once they've written the order out, once the clerk has completed it, is needing to sign off on it and approve it before it actually goes out the door. So as I noted, a lot of the changes that I made, they're noted in the executive report. I would estimate that we've probably made 25 to 30 changes already, some which are substantial, others which are in process. So we are bringing the court into compliance. I think it's important to note that my time has been primarily spent in court operations, so most of the changes are coming from that area. So it's our plan that eventually, once we get that foundation set, we're comfortable, we know that we're operating where we should be operating, then my trusty assistant over here is going to get me some coverage so I can go up front and we can start addressing some issues there that may have come up during the operational reviews. So we want to make sure that that division of the court is operating as well. So with respect to DUI case processing, when I took the bench, I immediately noticed that I was processing numerous DUIs. I had originally attributed that to an excessive caseload and just random fluctuations. I mean, they happen just like you saw the civil traffic. These fluctuations, they just occur. And sometimes it's due to increased police enforcement. It could be a seasonal thing. They just happen. So I continued working in the courtroom and noticed the caseload wasn't reducing. So I asked the court administrator to run some reports. And we started off with the DUI cases with the emphasis on those cases that were non-compliant. We got time standards that we need to meet, right? So I took those cases, ran a full report of the cases with an emphasis on those cases that were out of compliance, started looking at those cases, and then noticed that there were a number of them and immediately started reducing the continuances in these old cases. What I started doing was overbooking my calendars. I had to do that in order to draw these cases back in and get them back into compliance, which means that now my dockets are going to get stacked up, and I fortunately had to warn my poor clerks that it was going to get congested and will continue to be congested until we can get that under control, but that's what we have to do in order to draw those cases back in that have gotten out of compliance. This process also led me to change the way that we were setting jury trials. The jury trials were being set and driven by an individual case. So if an individual case came up that wanted a jury trial, we were reacting to the jury, to that particular case. So I've changed that process around now where I'm setting multiple jury case management hearings. I'm sending a lot of the cases in there. Once we determine who's going to go to trial, if you're going to go to trial, we're going to set that jury trial on the back end so that they're not driving us, but we're driving them in terms of how many we can handle and actually address. So the caseload, the DUI caseload just continued. So the administrator gathered additional comparison statistical data, which is generated by the Supreme Court, and they had confirmed my suspicions that the Goodyear Court was processing an extraordinarily high number of the DUIs. The data demonstrated that we're adjudicating more DUI cases than any other court on the west side. And that's including the Glendale City Court, who has an approximate population of about 300,000, running 3 judges and 1 civil traffic hearing officer. So we recently obtained and provided, did they get a copy of that, Chris?
Not these, Your Honor.
The statewide?
Not these, Judge.
I'm talking about the comparison, where we're number 8?
Not from the database,
Okay.
not from the database.
So we had another statistic that was obtained from limited jurisdiction filings and terminations. So this was a statewide statistic that we got our hands on. Again, this is a statistic that is generated by the Supreme Court. In the state of Arizona, your court is number 8 in DUI case filing and processing. That is amazing, considering the population. And so, you know, that goes with enforcement, that goes with growth. I was wanting to get this to you, but maybe we can get this to you later on. I think it's an interesting statistic that we need to keep our eye on and consider what we're going to do with that.
Keep winning that award.
Question?
Judge, yeah, I think we have a question right here. Go ahead.
Yeah, the DUI cases, is what you're saying, does that mean that we have an unusual amount in the city of Goodyear and the West Valley? City of Goodyear?
City of Goodyear is number 8 in the state, so I would say that in
Unusual.
terms of enforcement, there is a emphasis
On DUI?
on DUI.
Because I had heard just recently that we have a lot of DUIs in this city. So my question is it enforcement? Obviously, it's enforcement because we're catching them. But how many people are driving under the influence
Yeah.
that we're not catching if it's that high? That scares me.
Well, I think what is telling is that you are getting them. And maybe
Majority, I hope.
And maybe where other cities are not getting them.
So that's a good thing.
They're enforcing the laws.
Good. That's a very good thing. Can we get a copy of that?
Yes.
Good.
We'll get you a copy of
Thank
that.
you.
Brandon?
Yeah, I know when I was vice mayor, I went to the Mothers Against Drunk Driving. I think 2 years in a row now, I think we're number 1 DUIs in the state of Arizona for catching them. So, for catching them. And more than Phoenix, more than any in the state. So, I'm not surprised that we have a lot of those, that we have a lot of them, so.
It was a little bit alarming to me just because the size of the city and the
Yeah,
enforcement, but.
I was surprised too.
yeah,
When I went to that award banquet, I was really surprised that we but we had more than, I would think Phoenix would have way more than everybody else, but they're just not as focused
Well,
on that as we are.
and they do have more than us, I mean, obviously, but then they have the highest in the state. So you've got Phoenix, who's actually number 1, and then you've got Mesa. So it may have been, I don't know what particular meeting you went to, or I think it was probably one officer who may have had several beyond, what is normal beyond other particular officers.
If I may add, just to kind of add to that, Phoenix being the largest municipal court in the state, when we ran some other comparisons for fiscal year '22, they had 105,116 filings compared to Goodyear's 10,215. If you think about how significant our DUI filings are to be ranked number 8, that just, what we're trying to convey is just the excessive amount of case processing a DUI means in Goodyear for a court our size.
Yes.
Bill?
Where are we population-wise? Aren't we like 11?
Yeah, about 100,000.
We're 111,000.
Number in the state, size-wise.
Oh, about 12.
I think we're number
Yeah,
12.
Yeah.
So the fact that we're number 8 isn't really that far off. I mean, when you think about population-wise, so, numbers are numbers. We just gotta be careful with that. But my question was, what's the conviction rate? I mean, what's the guilty rate on these DUIs? Do we have 10,000 DUI arrests, but we only have 200 convictions?
Oh, I couldn't speak to those stats.
Because I think that is a number that is pertinent to us. Are we just out arresting people for DUI? Everybody gets a DUI, but nobody gets a conviction? Or is our conviction rate really high? I think getting the rest of this story is important.
And I don't know if I can give you those numbers. I can tell you from my experience on the bench, I'm not dismissing a lot of DUIs.
Yeah, so I think getting that would be helpful
yes.
for us, even if it's just a percentage.
Councilmember Stipp, if I may, what fiscal years, there are reports that the court can run. I can just kind of tell you, we don't typically, that's not a report we generally run because we don't.
It's probably ours.
There's probably a city.
They'll probably come from the prosecutor's office. We can say how many were charged, and we can get numbers for you.
Can you get numbers?
Yeah,
I'd like them to.
I think it tells the rest of the story. I mean, you guys are, you're firing off 10,000 DUIs and this number of battery cases and whatnot, but it's only you're the end of the story. the story starts with PD on the other end, and it'd be kind of nice to know the first chapter and the last chapter, that's all. I mean, it's nothing urgent, but, and I've been looking for, I don't see Art here, so, and if he knows it off the top of his head, I'm gonna be shocked. You know, I would be shocked if you go, oh yeah, it's 29% or it's 99%.
Yeah, that's not something I could speak to.
No, and I wouldn't expect you to, so I think just getting that information later on is fine.
Go ahead.
And I appreciate that, and I think that does speak that we do have a lot of number, and I do appreciate that we can get the stats on like how many were changes of plea, how many actually went to trial. I think that would be helpful for this council, and you gotta keep in mind, Phoenix, you know, is what, the 5th largest city. They have a building downtown with what, 20-some courtrooms in it, and they have DUI motor squads, and that's all they do is they
Right.
go do DUIs at 8 p.m. and they stay on to the night shift. So when we have that many and we don't have the dedicated DUI squad, I think that really does speak. I'm concerned about the fact that you are spending, I know it's good because you're new, to get your feet and see how the court runs, but so much time on the bench that we have such heavy dockets for our court to have our chief presiding judge to spend, I mean, we want you on the bench, yes, but I think that is kind of concerning that you are there almost all day on the bench. So that is one concern I do have as we go forward, the use of pro tems, and you'll let us know what pro tems you need to help fill those holes for us. I do have a question. It wasn't really listed here for the Rule 11s. I know this is an issue that is kind of like many courts in the valley are dealing with, is the cost of the Rule 11, the pre-Rule 11, the restoration costs to send people to Rule 11. Can we get what those costs are per an evaluation and how much we spend? Because Rule 11 is mental health competency court. If you are not competent, you cannot go to trial. So the prosecutor either will dismiss in many cases if it's a trespass, but if there's a victim, many times they'll try to get him competent, which means they will see a doctor. And I've heard upwards that these can cost $20,000, $30,000 a clip to get people, but you can't try them, you can't convict them until they're competent. So I would like to get what our statuses are when we especially look at that community court, because I know homelessness and the mental health really do go together. So that would be one thing. So I thank you for your report. This is great, so thank you.
We can wait till the end and ask questions, or
Well, if you have one right now, it's okay.
I don't know if you have an answer, I probably don't right now.
I don't know, we don't have an answer to that, but we will look.
We do, Councilmember Loretano, we do budget for those mental health costs and have been within budget. We work with Superior Court through an agreement and are invoiced for those mental health appointments. And it's kind of unpredictable. You don't know how many Rule 11s you'll have. You don't know how many will be resolved at the pre-screen level, which for the rest of the council is the initial evaluation stage with a mental health expert. If it's determined a defendant needs to go through a full mental evaluation, it goes what they call full Rule 11, and then those costs can be significantly higher.
Can you get us what those costs are? Because I think that's important when
Absolutely.
we talk about
Off the
starting
top
that
of
whole
my head,
community
it's,
court.
I believe,
Okay.
less than $300 for the initial pre-screen. I think it's $260.
Okay, so that's the cheap one.
But we're in budget.
Correct.
Good.
Yes.
Got something, Wally?
My
Go ahead.
question was, why were so many DUIs out of compliance? Why were they out of compliance? Were they just not being?
In terms of the time standards, so there are time standards by the Supreme Court, which says we're supposed to adjudicate a DUI
Right.
case within 180 days.
Or did we just hold them?
DUIs have a tendency to be continued longer than they should be. So again, that's why my initial reaction was to start identifying them and then cutting back the length of continuances I was going to be allowing
Okay.
the parties. So it's just something that accumulated over time.
Okay, thank you.
Just a quick question, Judge. Do you have the capability of have multiple courts going in your area at the same time?
We can run 2 courts if we can staff them.
Okay, because my next question is, if you're that backlogged, is there value in bringing in a pro tem running simultaneous courts to try to bring your cases down?
I think there's going to be a value in having additional judicial resources.
Okay, so, because if you're that backlogged, maybe to try to catch you up, and that's something you may come to council with, just trying to get some additional resources to try to bring those cases down.
Mayor and
Think about
council,
that.
just to add on that, we are waiting for our temporary facility improvement project to be completed.
Okay.
A significant part of that project, which we will speak to, I believe I'll speak to
Yeah,
on the
couple
next
minutes.
slide. And we don't have sufficient lobby space. So even if we put our defendants into the 2 courtrooms we have, we don't have anywhere to queue them in the lobby. I think we have about 15 seats, so part of our project is to provide 2 large capacity seating areas by popping out part of the facility into some unused, I don't know if you recall when you were at the facility, there was just landscaping, so we have opportunity to pop out and create 2 seating areas. 1 seating area for customers waiting to see a prosecutor or just general court, but we are currently lacking the facility space to queue customers outside of the courtrooms, which is a significant part of our process.
So once you do that, then possibly some additional resources to bring the cases down? I guess.
Absolutely, yes. That was one of the main driving factors for requesting the temporary improvements, was to
Okay.
be able to run 2 functioning courtrooms.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, to Wally's question, just to continue, just to be sure, I'm not following. Out of compliance means out of compliance for the courts or out of compliance from the PD? They are not being turned in on time, or?
Meaning the court isn't adjudicating them within the time standards that are recommended by the Supreme Court or
Okay,
imposed by the
but we're
Supreme
getting them in on time from the PD and
Oh,
all
yeah.
that kind of stuff?
Court.
Okay,
That
that's
is
my
not, yeah,
question.
that's not an issue. You have to understand as well, when COVID hit,
Right.
that really put a backlog in a lot of cases, and,
Right.
you know, it took me almost a year to get out of that in another court that I was in, so,
And you're picking it up from wherever
wherever we left off.
Which we were behind, we know that. And we're glad you're here.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right. Oh, was there another question?
Somebody else?
Oh, no.
Okay.
So actually, I'm just going to talk a little bit, just kind of a recap. I actually begin to close the report. So it's just important to know that, well, we're going to continue to grow. There's going to be an increase in population. There's going to be an increase if police continues in the enforcement level that they're continuing. And growth means resources. So just to drive another point home with respect to the court appointed, just so you're aware, I actually implemented a procedure to evaluate a defendant's ability to pay and contribute towards appointing counsel. You have to understand the defendants, they're typically indigent. It's going to be minimal what they can contribute, but I am asking for contributions when I evaluate a defendant's financial affidavit and determine that they have an ability to help pay for that cost. Again, it's going to be minimal, but it's important. Also, I think with respect to court-appointed counsel, I think counsel should be aware that you can only appoint so many defendants to one individual before they're presumed to be ineffective. So another reason that we're having to have multiple court-appointed attorneys. This, just to go back to the DUI, just because it was mentioned before in terms of stats, and I mean, I'm not trying to alarm anybody, but I think we should be aware of the actual position that we're in with respect to this court. When I say we're number 8 in the state, the court that is above us is Tucson, okay? Tucson City Court is above us with a population of 500,000. We had 1,279, right, in terms of the case filings with respect to DUIs, and they were at 1,669. So you're talking a 400 case difference between a city that has a population of 500,000 and running 8 judges. I think that's significant. The city right below us is actually Peoria, and we have comparable filings with respect to Peoria. We run about the same caseload. Now, their population is probably twice our population, but they are running 2 judges in that court as well. So they have two full-time judges in that court. And I just bring that to your attention again, not as to be alarming, but I think we need to know where we're at with respect to these cases, and it's an issue that we're gonna have to deal with. They are time-consuming, and they have a tendency to return back to the court. We got compliance issues with mandatory sentencing with respect to fines, with respect to counseling, with respect to a lot of sub-I pleas that are now being put out there with the interlocks. And you have a tendency with respect to the substance abuse counseling, you're seeing these individuals come back and you have to deal with them over and over and over because you got to get them compliant. So they make repeat returns back to the court. And I just want to say, you know, I've learned a lot of techniques. I know a lot of techniques. I can deal with these, but I think realistically, as some of you have indicated, there's going to need to be some resources in order to actually get them into a compliance. So anyways, I'm going to pass it on to Crystal. She's going to talk to you a little bit about the clerk assignment ratios and space planning.
Yes,
Just a
thank you.
quick question. If they're found guilty DUI, are you allowed to put some type of a thing within the car that they have to breathe into it before they can start the car? Are you
So-
allowed to do that?
Yeah, just about every one of your extreme DUIs carries with it a mandatory interlock.
Okay.
So they're going to be interlocks. They're offering plea agreements, which we call sub-I pleas. I know that doesn't mean anything to anybody, but it's referencing a section of the statute that allows jail time to be reduced for an extended time of placing the interlock. So just about every DUI that's going to result in a conviction requires that interlock to be installed.
Okay.
For even a short period of time, just to gain compliance now. So there's the court, right, responsibility, and there's MVD responsibility. So anytime you're gonna wanna get your license back, you're gonna have to install that ignition interlock device before you can get your license back. But the court also has an independent ability to do that through certain plea agreements are taken in the way that they're drafted.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Judge. Mayor and Council, as we mentioned, with our significant case growth and activity, we took the opportunity to participate in the temporary facility improvements in our complex. And part of that was we recognize that we need to expand our courtroom time. We have 2 operable courtrooms at this time. We have slowly expanded since Judge Delgado, even before Judge Delgado came in the beginning of 2023, we started running a secondary courtroom on Mondays just to ease us in and see how we could manage with our existing staff running 2 dual courtrooms. So we did that for the past year. Again, with Judge Delgado joining us, we have now added an increased courtroom time on Fridays. But we know that in order to run those really heavy dockets Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, which is where the majority of our case activity occurs, we need adequate space to queue our customers. We received feedback in our last op review, just through the observations from the Supreme Court, that it was a lot of strain put on our security, for example. If you recall where our security is located, they're in the center of that lobby. We have courtrooms on the north end, and we have prosecutor and transaction windows on the south end. So that poor guard is just kind of bouncing back and forth with a lot of activity. We regularly screen over 1,000 individuals every month through court security. And we recognize that we really needed to look for opportunities to expand capacity for our customers to wait. We used to experience a time where we used to have, it was only the defendant only that could come into courtroom. And we recognize that's just not a reality. Some folks have to bring family, friends, children with them. So we had an opportunity to look for a place to queue our customers because sometimes they're there for an extended amount of time, just depending on how full the dockets get. So we worked with engineering and we discovered, we can pop out a part of the facility. And so that is scheduled to begin our construction in the next couple of months. Also, if you've been in our back staff area, we've kind of got cubicles on top of cubicles and just looked for any existing space to kind of fit team members. And so part of this project is that what used to be the audiovisual room is going to be repurposed. We're going to add another transaction window because if you go through the kind of your day in court, you go into one courtroom, you see your judge. We have an opportunity once you are going to receive your paperwork, that happens at a separate window outside of court. So we want to give defendants the opportunity to ask their questions and understand the paperwork, understand what they're signing, really make sure that they know what is happening before they leave our building. We can't do that in the courtroom when things are still moving and shaking in there. So we call it window 4. Well, now we need a window 4 for each courtroom. So we're going to repurpose and do some construction to add another transaction window. And then if you recall kind of the curve of the dais where council used to sit, behind that wall was, for those that have been there, the old e-session room, really tight little comfy quarters. That's going to get repurposed, so we have some future growth opportunity to add up to 5 additional staff members within this facility. And in addition to that, we've been doing a lot of work. We've got really creative in trying to purge cases that have met retention. And so that way we can repurpose the old filing room into a new suitable break room for the existing staff, because that old e-session room is where you can have a meeting if there's only 6 of you to have the meeting, or you can have your lunch break, or you can do training, or it's the kind of the catch-all. And we just recognize that we've outgrown it. So we're going to repurpose. They're going to pop out a part of our building into the parking lot. So we'll lose a couple of spaces, but that's okay because we want to have an adequate break room and conference room for our team to get us through the end of life in this facility. So those are some of the planning in action that we have going for our current growth. And we expect that we can absorb 5 additional team members. We also are going to build or have construction of 1 additional leadership office. So when you used to come in that center door in the back, there was kind of, we used to set the food and the snacks out there. That's going to become an office. So then we're pretty much at capacity for that current footprint. And when we talk about adding staff, when Judge and I were using this very helpful statistical website. So one of the great things being part of the judicial branch is that there's a lot of resources and we provide a lot of stats, and now they're using technology to put it all in one place and we can run comparisons. So now there's an interactive dashboard, and through Judge and I kind of running these comparisons, we found that there was a full-time personnel non-judicial staffing comparison. And so we were able to run that because, again, you kind of so focused in your own court about just trying to address your existing caseload, and you really don't start looking like, well, what are other courts doing? How do we compare to personnel? And we actually found that we were ranked 9th for full-time personnel per employee caseload. So, which was pretty shocking to Judge and I as well, just looking at, wow, we really have, so currently, when we look at this dashboard, Goodyear is, and this is for non-judicial personnel, 786 filings per team member. Now, this doesn't account for, in those totals, that these are supervisors that may not be direct working. The supervisors are not direct working the files, so that impacts our numbers as well. So we just have found that kind of that we were kind of on the right path in thinking that we might have an excessively high kind of caseload for our team, and just kind of exploring options of, okay, how do we compare? We actually have data now that shows us how we can compare. Again, when we talk about Phoenix, they have a per employee caseload of 446 versus again, Goodyear at 786 per full-time employee. So that is data that we are going to continue to look into, and that we may bring back in future discussions with council, but just something that we felt was relevant to share. And again, I will be providing this statewide link. It's great. It's a great tool. It's available to everybody. But we found that was some very important data to share with the council as well.
So I'm gonna go ahead and close it up. You all brought me on. We wanted to get a high-performing court. That's our goal. We want to be a high-performing court. So I'm going to continue to evaluate the processes, the procedures, continue to make changes as we're going through and making sure that we're in compliance in all of our areas with respect to the court. You've tasked me with some goals. We're working on those goals. Specifically, somebody mentioned the specialty court. This is what I wanted to do with respect, as advised counsel, that what I would like to do is get an individual who can actually do a formal survey so that we can determine the identity of that target population, whether it's gonna be homeless, whether it's gonna be mental health, whether it's gonna be veterans, whatever the case may be. I wanted to actually do a formal survey so that we could take a look to see where is that need, if that need exists. So we're gonna move down that road. We got some vacancies we need to fill up and get some individuals trained that are still learning, but they are doing a good job. And as always, I told you that I was gonna work on team unity and building a team, and that's what we're doing.
Thank you, Judge. Is that it?
That's it.
Well, let me go around and see if we got any other questions. Vice Mayor?
Well, I want to thank you for the work that you've done in a short amount of time, and certainly the
Been
biggest
busy.
obvious thing is just putting our court back on a full-time work schedule. I mean, that is huge right there, and I'm really pleased to see that you have a collaborative relationship with the city prosecutor. It's for the good of the people who come in, how the court works, and just working together to solve problems. Happy to hear that you're putting us back into compliance in so many areas and that you're really realistically looking at our challenges that we face as well. It is interesting statistic about the DUIs. Apparently that's our thing and will probably continue to be, and so we need to be prepared on how to deal with it. But all in all very encouraging news, and thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you very much. You did a lot in a short period of time.
We've been busy.
I think it's a little eye-opening to see what fixes are really going to be needed from looking at the report to get us to where we need to be. And it looks like we are kind of very much behind the 8 ball right now. So I do appreciate your hard work, and Crystal, you and your staff and everyone's hard work there. I do have a couple questions. How many pro tems do you have with you now?
Actively working, we've got a pro tem that comes in on Monday. They work the civil docket. Every other week, they'll work a full day. And then we have the pro tem that comes in on Friday mornings for half a day.
Wow. And what happens if you all get a jury trial since you don't have places to put people? How do you guys do that for trials?
We're gonna continue to run a second docket. So
Okay.
we're gonna have pro tems that are gonna be available. I've got 2 jury trials actually that have been scheduled, one for next month and the following. So our intent is to continue running those dockets with pro tems. Otherwise, we're gonna fall behind.
And Councilmember Laurentano, previous to Judge Delgado, we would reserve or block the calendar just for the jury trial.
So you don't have one docket that has no work, no home to go to?
But we're now, but we've seen an increase, we're kind of ramping back up in trial activity, and so Judge Delgado and I had a discussion that we need to run 2 dockets. So, we are going to maintain a second docket in addition to the jury trial, and we would bring a pro tem in for that second docket.
And
So-
if you could send us like the time of some of your dockets or a jury trial, because I think it'd be really great if anyone's interested to go in and observe, who hasn't seen the process and seen how crowded and how busy you guys are, I think that would be a great thing. So thank you very
Absolutely.
much for your work, both you guys.
Thank you.
I just want to say that I am really happy that you're here, as I said before, because obviously you have really done a lot in a very short period of time. And you did everything you said you were going to do. I'm sure there's more to do yet. And I'm, like Laura, I'm shocked by some of the excessive DUI. I think that we're going to have some street racing issues we're coming upon now too, from what we're hearing. And I'd like to know more about that if you do get an excessive amount. That's something that I'm interested in. And you've got the best sitting right next to you. She's great. I think she's great.
Absolutely.
And I'm so glad you have her helping you through this, because it's got to be hard to pick up where somebody else left off. But you're pretty much bringing us up to speed and where we need to be. And I thank you for that, and we're really happy you're here.
Thank you.
Anything else? Go ahead. There you go, Wally.
I'm not surprised that you're growing the way you're going, because their city's growing, and we just expect it. And I'm sure it's gonna come to the point where you're gonna outgrow that building, and we're gonna have to address where we're gonna put you. but I appreciate you trying to figure out how to make that building work. Maybe we can kick some other people out and you can take, no, I guess we can't because the School of Rock's going in right.
What's that?
Never mind. But I really appreciate you doing that. I understand that. And Judge, just so that you know, we as a council for the last 5 or 6 years have made sure that our police department aggressively go after the DUIs. I am not surprised by the numbers. We have a drinking town. We have parties all the time. We have spring training. We have pickleball. I mean, we have everything.
Yeah.
And a lot of your numbers are repeats. They're not all one just number for the DUI. You've got repeats coming in
Yeah.
that add to the number, so you could see a guy 6 or 8 times, literally, before he either goes to jail or goes into treatment. So
Your
I
police
un-
department's doing an amazing job.
They are. The police department is wonderful, and I appreciate all that traffic does, because we really want them to get the DUIs off the road. We don't want anyone killed because of a DUI. Have you thought of any, well, that's not what I want to say, because I don't want to say it that way, but we thought perhaps at one time we would run a Saturday court once a month or once every 6 weeks, so that the people who work could come in and take care of their tickets or whatever it is. Have you had any thought? You don't have time to do that now, but later on down the road, would you just kind of take that under
Absolutely.
your wing? I think, because I remember getting complaints for people saying, you know, we have to take off from work, and work isn't really good with us getting off, and I just think a Saturday would work. How many Goodyear veterans are you reporting, or you're sending to courts?
How many we
I can
got?
speak
8?
to that, Councilmember Campbell. There's 12 that we
Oh,
have
12,
reported.
see, there's not a big number.
I mean, it's steadily increasing. We have referred 12. January 16th, there were 3 that have graduated. They will return to our court on.
What does graduated mean? Do they
So
go to
it means
school?
that they've successfully completed their program that Glendale has assigned them to. So it
Okay.
could be treatment. We don't have that information yet. That is
No.
going to come back. Those
Okay.
3 cases are scheduled on January 30th, but we
Okay.
have received their certificate of completion. Now
Okay.
they're going to come back and see Judge Delgado for final
Okay.
sentencing. And we've had just one defendant on January 16th that voluntarily withdrew from the program.
Mm-hmm.
But the beauty of that program is that any time a defendant could request to be reinstated into the
Okay.
program.
Judge, are you the one I talked to about Goodyear joining the Glendale court? Because I was asked by the mayor of Glendale to talk to their judge to get our city involved in their court, but I don't remember who I talked to.
No, it wouldn't have been me.
Okay.
It would have been Judge DiPiazza.
Oh, yeah, it is. That was him. Yeah, okay, never mind. Because I didn't ask him how the court works. He just wanted to know if we would think about coming on
Right.
board, so. All right, and then my last question was, okay, so let's see. Let me just look. I've been making, my last question is it Arizona law or Arizona rules that govern how you do virtual meetings and things? Because my daughter is an attorney in Washington State, and she has yet to go into a courtroom since COVID. Everything they do is all
Virtually?
Zoom, everything.
That's a criminal rule of procedure.
Is it?
It's an Arizona, criminal rule of procedure
Is
that
there any
governs.
thought for y'all to talk to the legislature to see if they would let y'all do some Zoom things?
Oh, we can do them. That's not the issue. The issue is having the hardware, the equipment, the bandwidth to do it. Again, our current AO as it stands, which is our administrative order, because of the court, its layout, and it's designed to be or presumed to be an in-person court, not a virtual court. Now, again, we are moving that direction.
Okay.
But we are talking, we need to get some bandwidth and some hardware.
No,
and-
but you
yeah,
would need more money,
Right.
I would assume, and that would be fine. I mean, we haven't had this conversation before because 3 years ago, we didn't even know what Zoom was. You know, because we never used it, so I'd
We're
like
gonna-
you to
We're gonna
continue to do
experiment
that.
with it as I indicated with the prosecutor. We're experimenting, we're gonna try to do a limited docket just to get things
Yeah.
moving in that direction.
I think it would help your staff too if you were doing some Zoom things rather than have everybody come in the courts.
And we have explored, it really can just depend on what the case is scheduled for.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So,
Sure.
There's definitely opportunity, and I think we have some really great ideas to
Good,
get us started
wonderful.
on that.
Well, we're excited to hear
Yeah.
what else you're gonna do. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Brandon?
Yeah, just to repeat, yeah, I thank you for all the hard work. I know you've been here for a very short amount of time, but I know you've done a lot reading through the report and things like that, identifying issues and trying to create solutions very quickly and try to keep up with the backlog. So court's very, very important. So I just want to make sure you guys have the tools and resources you need to be successful there. I like the idea of building it out and making it more accommodating and getting more efficiencies in there as well. So thank you for what you're doing there and also trying to keep us safe with the DUIs and all those kinds of things as well. So
No, I appreciate that. I
Thank
remember the mayor telling me when I got sworn in, now make sure you keep those promises you made. So we're trying to keep those promises.
Again, thank you for all the work, and I suspect your budget requests are going to be kind of interesting. So we're looking forward to that in the budget process. So with that, next meeting is January 29th, and no further business. Meeting's adjourned.